I have played through the Outer Worlds twice, and on neither of my playthroughs did I put any points into guns. The first time was for a challenge, and the second time was to level up a character to repeat that challenge but for the Paralon Gorgon DLC. So I've never really gotten a feel for the game's gunplay, and part of the reason why I've neglected to review the game proper is that guns are such a big part of the game's gameplay, and I haven't really played that part. That's all about to change, kinda, but not really. In the Outer Worlds there are these things called science weapons, and they are experimental guns that don't act like normal guns and all have some sort of weird twist. There are 5 of them in the main game and 1 in the expansion, and we're gonna attempt to beat the game using just them. This is a mistake, but let's get into it. Let's find out if you can beat the Outer Worlds on Supernova using only science weapons. Right, actually our game is gonna start out a lot like my pacifist playthrough for the first chunk, because the first available science weapon is in Phineas's lab, and we have to get the unreliable airborne to get there. Except that unlike a pacifist playthrough, we can't talk anyone into doing anything that would make sneaking past the marauders or the robots any easier. This is not gonna be good. Alright, we use this gun to fire the only normal shot of the playthrough to clear these barrels, and then we sprint past the marauders on the other side, sneak past another patrol of them and sneak into the ship. Here we of course make a deal with Ada to become the new Captain Hawthorne, and we then head out to find a new power thing so that we can once again get the ship airborne. The normal way to do this is to go to Edgewater and talk to Reed Thompson, who then starts a quest where you have to go to a geothermal plant and choose to direct the power either to Edgewater or to a settlement where some flower hippies live that don't want to be under corporate control. I kinda wanna shake things up, so we're gonna head over to the flower hippies directly and steal their power converter and attempt to skip all the geothermal nonsense, because that place has so many fucking robots. And it turns out I can't. Attempting to remove the power converter shocks the player because the power plant is still sending power to the converter, and there is no way to disable it. Trust me, I checked. Curiously, unlike in other Obsidian games, and other parts of this game for that matter, there are no ways to initiate any further stages of the quest from this settlement. I have to go back to Edgewater to talk to Reed Thompson, who will then tell me to go talk to this old lady. Weird. Alright, so we head back to Edgewater, get the geothermal plant quest from Reed, and then we head over to the plant and then die a bunch of times. Because fucking poverty. See, normally when you meet a companion, you can ask them to go back to the ship. But when you meet Parvati, you have no ship for her to go back to, so you can't send her anywhere, and she is forced to go with you to the Death Robot factory, where she gets spotted and gets both of you killed. Somehow I managed to get Parvati killed without myself dying by using the old exit the load zone and then re-enter it again trick. And then I sprinted through the facility, hacked the computer, flipped the 3 switches, and then I diverted power to the flower hippies for a change instead of Edgewater. And then I went to confront Reed. Normally with speech check I could convince Reed and his men to stand down and go join the flower hippies. But Lab Boy, our leading man, has the charisma of someone who doesn't have any charisma. So we have to act fast and yoink the power converter from Reed and then run the hell out of there. With that in hand, we get the unreliable operational and blast off into space. First we arrive on the groundbreaker, and here we need to pick up a few quests to get us on track to get some levels so we can level up, because we are gonna need that. The problem with science weapons, other than the fact that we don't have any and the fact that they shoot weird effects that don't all raise directly damage, is that they are governed by both the science skill and a weapon skill. And I have a feeling that that means that we're gonna need quite a few extra levels to be able to do any kind of damage close to what a normal gun will do. I wanted to, while I was here, to pick up a couple of locks that put 2 more science weapons on our quest marker, but Lab Boy was a little light on bits, so this is gonna be a bad time. We go to Phineas's lab instead and pick up the Shrinkway, the absolute worst science weapon there is, or so I thought. I thought it just shrank enemies, but it actually does a tiny bit of damage after all. And after an attempt, after I I kinda got it after many tries. I finally managed to take down a group of Marauder on Scylla and save Captain Irion and secured a medical shipment that he is bringing to the Groundbreaker. And with that done and a few bits in Lab Boy's pockets, we went back to the Groundbreaker, picked up Ellie as a companion and bought the logs we needed. Then Felix, Lab Boy and Ellie took down some bandits in the back room of the Groundbreaker and we got the second science weapon, the prismatic hammer. The other point on the map is telling us to go back to Scylla, which I already knew. I just wasn't sure on where on Scylla the science weapon was. But in general I kinda realized something here. I died about 5 times just getting to the weapon, which is the weird stick thing that has an unknown effect. I need to go back to Terra 2 and do the quests around Edgewater and level up and put some points into guns and melee. Because while I can kill one enemy fairly easily, I can't kill more than that in a fight, not without being at serious risk. And just about every enemy encountered, at least out in the open, is in a group of at least 4. So we went back to Edgewater, talked to Vicar Max, found his book, recruited him, found the lost flower hippie resident and got her to go back to the other flower hippies, and then we went to the Roseway and started helping out the bored scientists and holy fuckaroonies is this playthrough gonna be, yes. As I entered a lab that had enemies neatly scattered, I learned a few things. I can't stealth snipe anything because the shrink ray effect is delayed and the enemy will call out for help before they die. The stun stick looking thing I picked up on Scylla stuns the enemies on the 3rd or 4th hit and it's weak as balls, and in general I need some melee skills because even with the prismatic hammer it takes me 2 hits to take someone out. And I also need to find some armor and more health because inside buildings there is less space for the enemies to miss, which means that there's more of a chance that the bullets will go into Lab Boy and kill him. And that has been happening a lot so far. After making my way through the lab, after a lot of trial and error in combination with my usual coward ways of luring the enemy out of a room, running into the room while they look for me, then run the hell back out, I managed to pick up some research, and on the way to the next lab to get the next phase of research, I finally reached level 8, which means that I could finally get the perk that boosts science weapon damage 50%. After raging for a bit, thinking that the perk didn't work, it finally started working, and inside the lab I used my now death laser to pulverize all the enemies there and get the next piece of research. Kind of. I got some of it, but I couldn't get to the chick who locks herself in because I managed to pulverize her corpse in the corner of the room, and the macho dude guard at the entrance can't seem to recognize that, and thinks I already have it and tells me to go back to Roseway. Weird. Anyways, things are finally starting to look up. And by looking up, I mean that I blazed through a ton of side quests with my new death ray and kept adding perks to my character to make the ray even more deadly. I even went back to Roseway and murdered the very heavily armed guards outside so that I could get the security card. And normally you can't fucking take down these guys, but with the ray, you can. And that became kind of a theme. After cleaning up house in Edgewater and doing a few quests on the Groundbreaker, we finally headed to Monarch. And after pulverizing a dozen Mantisaurs and Marauders around Stilla Bay, I decided to go to Cascadia. Cascadia, if you are unaware, is an abandoned port that you can learn about pretty early on, and you don't need a nav key to fly to it, and you can effectively skip that whole nav key business. However, Cascadia is absolutely fucking infested with monsters, and there is a world of pain between it and safety when you land. So it is effectively blocked off. Unless you have managed to take one of the game's most useless weapons and turn it into a death ray, at which point the named Mantisaur boss creatures can go fuck themselves. This is normally not possible. These things will absolutely mess you up, but somehow the death ray just annihilates them. Because it stuns them, and then it shrinks them down, and it constantly damages them while the trigger is being held. And it has a very generous reticle. With the death ray we did some jobs with Sublight to get a few more levels and grant us entrance to one of the secret labs where we got to pick up the mind control ray. After getting that one, we also picked up the gloop gun and completed the set of science weapons in the main game. The Stombaton thing that freezes can stay in the locker room about the unreliable, but everything else will come in handy at times. The gloop gun is great for crowd control, and the mind control comes in very handy when up against groups where there is a big monster and a lot of smaller ones, as you can aim it at the biggest one and make it kill all the small ones, and it doesn't waste as much ammo as the shrink gun does. And there's a lot less risk involved as the big monster absorbs all the aggro, and sometimes you can be so lucky that you're not even noticed by the group, and after you have mind controlled a monster and made them kill it, they will just go back to doing their thing. Speaking of ammo, having enough bits has actually been a bit of a problem, so we did a salvage mission for Sublight, which will eventually grant us access to a bigger job in Byzantium, and it had us infiltrate an abandoned space station and fight off some UDL soldiers and netted us a fair bit of bits. With those bits we bought a lot more ammo, which we got at a nice discount. And then we went to go talk to the brokers to start the mission to take over the radio broadcast on Monarch. Normally, you can enter a cave under the broker's fortress and evade a bunch of dangerous monsters. Then further up the mountain, team up with some mercenaries to take out the marauders and enter the facilities and fight the remaining marauders alongside the mercs. But we don't need that. We can take the direct route, mind control the monsters into killing each other, death ray the marauders outside and then inside, and then make our way to the broker no problem. Meeting up with the broker, we of course get the quest to stop the two other radio signals on the planet, the MSI and the Iconoclasts. The MSI are very easy to make agreeable, just go steal a dumb form so that they can be readmitted into the board. And for the Iconoclasts we need to get their printing press operational. Both quests involved a lot of death raying, but was absolute pieces of cake. Returning to the broker, we flip the signal and makes the ship go boom, and then we go check that thing that will let one of the factions take control of the planet. In my two previous playthroughs I managed to convince the MSI to remain independent and the Iconoclasts to join them. But Labboy knows only one thing, and that thing is science, and he can't use science to convince them to be friends. In fact, I did so poorly that while I managed to convince the MSI to remain semi-independent, I messed up relations with the Iconoclasts so bad that I had to death ray all of them. And it's kind of fucked up to pulverize a couple of main story NPCs that I was trying to bring over to my side just a few moments ago. That's what's neat, I guess, about these challenges. Experiencing things from a new angle and forcing yourself to play a certain way that lets you see new stuff. And very much speaking of, the rest of the game is completely different from how I played it previously. Normally from this point on, my character would be so leveled that I could talk my way through everything and keep up the holographic shroud the entire time, but I can't do that with Labboy. And the death ray is simply just too fun. So I arrived on Byzantium, pulverized everyone in the Earth Minister's mansion and got his message to send to the people. Then we went over and pulverized everyone in the ministry and sent the message out to the people of Halcyon, explaining that the colony is doomed. Then we blasted off into space and pulverized everyone aboard the Hope and skipped the ship back to Phineas's lab. Then pulverized everyone at Phineas's lab and learned that he had been kidnapped. And then we naturally went and pulverized everyone at Tartarus with only the help of the MSI, since they are the only faction that we haven't managed to kinda piss off yet. Then my game crashed right as the ending dialogue with Akande triggered, so I had to go pulverize everyone at Tartarus again because of the stingy supernova autosaves. And then I finally faced off against Ram, who I have never actually fought before, and I accidentally bugged him and got myself killed. See, normally you dodge him and damage him, and at certain intervals he releases these drones that you then take out, then repeat that cycle until he dies. But I somehow managed to get him down to 25-ish% health, which made him summon all of his drones at once. And then the game lagged a lot and I died. So I pulverized everyone at Tartarus again and retried the boss fight. After a lot of dodging and being patient and taking my time, I managed to beat him with a combination of the death ray when he was alone, and used the mind control ray to make the drone suicide against each other when he summoned those. And then I made my way to Akande and zapped her in the face and turned her into ash, and with that, I proved that you can indeed beat the Outer Worlds on Supernova using only science weapons. It's just stupidly hard right off the bat, because there are no science weapons available, and you can't really rely on any of the pacifist approaches, because you don't have enough points in them, as you really need to put every point into science to make the guns you will eventually acquire viable. I think a few perks are neglected to mention that were absolutely essential, aside from the 50% buffs to science weapon damage, are the Vampirism perk and the 5% increase in damage per floor perk. The Vampirism perk is essential early on, as it recoups a portion of your health for every enemy you kill, and in firefights it saved my ass so many times when one or more enemies would charge me, because I could take one hit, manage to take one enemy down, and then get enough health back to take another hit from another enemy and then take them down. The other came in handy around Monarch. See, the flaws in the game are rarely a good thing on paper. The trade-off is bad, as you're making yourself weaker against a certain type of enemy. And there aren't a lot of enemy types, so you're gonna be weak fighting against a large portion of the total enemy roster. Unless you take the perk that gives you 5% extra damage per floor you take. Even just taking one at that point is a trade-off, and I think I acquired 5 for a total of 25% damage increase, and I could definitely feel the difference each time I accepted a floor. Anyways, it was really fun crafting this playthrough. I thought it was gonna suck hard, and it did for the first 6 hours, but then as you saw, the shrink ray became a death ray and the game became a lot easier than it normally is actually, and I effectively managed to negate leveling and leveling caps. It's always fun to mess with games like this. So, go play The Outer Worlds. It's a fantastic little Bloodlines-like game that's set in an anarcho-capitalist hellscape in space. So, until next time, bye bye.